and welcome. My name is Carol Carter, and I'm the founder and CEO of Global Minded. We are dedicated to creating a capable, diverse talent pipeline to get more women, people of color, ability status, LGBTQIA, any way you can define diversity into the education, economic mobility, and leadership pipeline. And we do that by working with students who are first generation to college, minoritized students, poverty affected students, and we connect them to role models, mentors, internships, and jobs. And you all today, because you're making time for this, are part of our celebration for Women's History Month and International Women. We're also celebrating. But we also know that a lot of young people, whether they're in K-12 or they're in college or in their first few years of work, don't always see themselves in the people that they are learning from or working with. So every month, Ryan runs these sessions called Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. And you can always count on seeing diverse, really interesting leaders from all different backgrounds. And we run them for K-12, technology, STEM, and foundations and funders, as well as Ryan's sessions. So thank you for joining us today. And with that, I'd like to introduce Ryan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another month that we have together to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I'm really, really excited today. First, let's state the obvious. I am not a woman, but I am thrilled to be in the space of such tremendous women, such tremendous leaders in honor of Women's History Month. And, you know, it's one of those things. This is one of those months where I get a little frustrated, if I'm being fully honest. Just, you know, I'm frustrated for like 90 days when we think about when we start with the MLK celebration and go through Women's History Month, the fact that we are still having to allocate time for people to think about the obvious. That's a little frustrating for me. But the flip side to that is we do get to take pause and have some really great moments and celebrate some really tremendous people. And that's what we're going to do today. We're celebrating some great people and taking some time to get to know and get to learn from just some tremendous leaders and understand a little bit about their journey, what they're up to, and get their insight and perspective on their experience, because we know that narrative is the key in shifting our community. When you understand people's viewpoints, when you understand where people are coming from, when you understand people's why and how, things seem to get just a little bit easier and our conversations get a little easier to have. But as you know, we only have about 50 minutes with these tremendous folks, and I want to thank them all for their time, their talent, and opening up their calendars to be here. And so we're going to jump right in. We're not going to do the read the bio thing. We don't have enough time to do that. And if I read their bios, we would be here till tomorrow. So that being said, thank you all for being here. Thank you to Global Minded, KPMG, the Colorado Community College System, and we are just going to jump right in with an introduction of our panelists, from our panelists, telling us a little bit about their journey to becoming a CEO or leader in their field, and a little bit about why they've become so committed to leadership and service. And so we're just going to start jumping around based on who I see on my screen. And so first up, we have Janet.
Hi, everyone, and I am delighted to be here. Thank you so much to Global Minded, and of course, Dr. Ryan Ross and Carol Carter for having me. My name is Janet C. Salazar. I am the Executive Chairman and President of the Foundation for the Support of the United Nations. We are an officially accredited partner of the United Nations in terms of implementation of projects and everything else that NGOs do with the United Nations. I'm also the chairman of the Salazar Global Group. It's a holding company. We have interest and operations in consulting, business development, impact investing, philanthropy, and advisory. I've been in this role navigating both business at a global scale and my humanitarian work through the foundation. And at that leadership position, being a CEO / president or chairman, there's been a lot of challenges, but at the same time, a lot of learning as well through the years. And it is because of those learnings that I was able to, again, navigate this tricky two worlds of simultaneously being, in the business world and at the same time the humanitarian work that I do. So again, excited to be here. I'm sure there will be so many other topics that we will be talking about, and I'm excited to just be able to learn new things and move forward with my fellow CEOs, women CEOs here. So yeah, thank you again for having me.
Great, thank you, welcome. Simone.
Thank you so much to Carol and Dr. Ross. It's a pleasure to be here with these amazing people. Don't know how I made the list, but I will take the God wink. So I am a recovering corporate executive, and I lovingly say recovering corporate executive because that race really can beat you up. And so it was a gift that continues to give every day as I work in my current role as CEO of the Colorado Women's Chamber, but it was also one of my greatest learning and life experiences, and really doing some deep systems dives into why are we the way we are? Why do we do what we do, specific to corporate ecosystems. And so I've done a lot of work over the past 5 or 6 years, and really uncovering this business architecture that we're currently navigating. And given that 2.2 million women have left the workforce, that navigation means that we're navigating away from it. And so I left corporate in 2018. I started a consultancy at that time, worked on some amazing projects, worked with some fabulous, brilliant, phenomenal, incredible leaders throughout the world. And now somehow my divine assignment, as I affectionately call it, is to work at CWCC to really create a space in Colorado where we're on the frontier of forging a new business architecture that revolves around some different principles. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rothenberg, it's Alami, right? Or Almi? How do I say it?
Yeah, it's Jessica.
Okay.
Rothenberg Alami, but Jessica is always fine. Thank you, Dr. Ross and Carol, for the invitation. I feel like I get the front row seat to this incredible group of folks, and appreciate the opportunity of talking about my role as a CEO since 2014. I am the founder of a mobile training company that works really hard with our partners and their end users to be sure that more people have access to micro training for better life, work, and health for all. I call this a culmination of life's work. On my own at 15, on the road, I saw a lot of things, from the sixth bunk of a converted school bus with my family of 7, that most people struggle to get, keep jobs, and thrive. And that's just most families in the United States. And what was always tricky about it is that as a bossy, very bossy girl, I was bossy about one thing. Everyone should win. Why is it just winner takes all? And when I got through the school system, I kept getting that other message. No, take it all. Don't share. But by the time I was on my own, it was really this quest to, can we create businesses that will start with equity at its center, really enable people to access livelihood on their terms, and ultimately thrive. And in that quest, I've had so much humbling, so much learning, and so many champions to support me to get there. So I look forward to sharing more today.
Great, thank you. Karen.
Hi, all. So nice to be here with all these amazing women and Dr. Ross, and thank you, Carol, for including me, both of you. And it's interesting to hear your stories, just the brief amount that I've heard so far, because I resonate with pretty much everything everyone has to say. I'm also a recovering corporate executive from Wall Street. So that was a pretty challenging industry to start out as, a financial advisor and work my way up to senior managing director of one of the most major firms on Wall Street. But in that journey, I really realized how important it is for us as women to pave the way for other women to thrive on Wall Street, because I think that is one of arguably the most challenging industries in which to do it. And as a result of that work, I had to leave because I was diagnosed with breast cancer and got very, very ill from some operations and that kind of thing. It really led me to believe how important my work was to continue, but on a very different scale. And that is to help women understand their relationship with money. I saw across the board the entire time I was in the industry that women, surprisingly enough, do not want to deal with their financial situation, whether they are multimillionaires or just starting out right out of college or not even educated. So it's really tragic to see that. And they'd always say to me, well, I'm not good with math. And so you don't need to be good with math. That has nothing really to do with your relationship with money and budgeting. So I started a little nonprofit years ago called Women of Wall Street. And since then, I have started another company as an entrepreneur, as the co-founder and CEO of Digame Spirits, which is a company that makes tequila and mezcal. In fact, I leave at 6 a.m. in the morning for Oaxaca to meet with all of our mezcalillas. It's been a really fun journey, learning a whole new business. And as I delegate my responsibilities away, I'm going to be delegating more and more time to Global Minded. That's why I'm on Carol's board. I'm her treasurer. And I think Global Minded is doing an incredible job at building the diverse talent pipeline that we so desperately, desperately need. So it's an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ross.
Thank you, Dr. Paccione.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. And again, thanks to you and Carol for hosting this and inviting me as well. I am the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Higher Education. And prior to that, I spent 12 years working in corporate training with a company that worked with, contracted with household names like Procter & Gamble and Nestle and Kellogg. And as I worked with them for 12 years, I noticed that in the senior leadership positions and certainly at the top of the organizations, there was very few representation, both of women and BIPOC individuals. And because of that, that really inspired me we were doing leadership training and EDI work, and it really inspired me to invest in these, especially the women who were in line for these promotions, to make sure that they had not just the technical mastery, but also the leadership skills to have a seat at the table and to actually take that ownership of that role. And so that has always been, I think that's what inspired me. And then when the governor appointed me to this position, I was thrilled, because not only did I get to use those skills and techniques that I had been training others to use, but really it was about building the next generation of leaders in higher education for the state. Colorado is one of the few states that has more women in the cabinet of the governor and more women in the legislature as well. And so that we have a great opportunity here in Colorado to lead the way. My credo that I developed when I was 20 years old is, I am as committed to your success as I am to my own. So for me, investing in and building up the team, building up women leaders across the state is really important to me. I'll stop there.
Thank you. And you bring up some good points. You know, it's interesting, the makeup of the governor's cabinet and the state legislature as it relates to women, but that's not what it looks like everywhere else. In fact, when we look at Fortune 500 companies, there are less than 50 women CEOs. And I'm just, from your perspective, how we messed that up? Why are there so few women CEOs? And what should we be thinking about to change that? And
Back to me?
Just jump on in.
Oh, anyone? Oh, yeah. You know what? One of the things that I saw in 12 years, and especially at a company like Procter & Gamble, let's say, which does a really good job actually with spreading their leadership around. There's many opportunities to lead. I always tell people, to be invaluable, you have to add value. So the question is, what's the value that you're adding when you have a seat at that table? What's the value that you add when you are a division leader, a section head, so my feeling is, the more value you add, the more invaluable you become to leadership. And so, but you do have to have both. You have to have the technical mastery, but you also have to have those leadership skills. And this is a place, I think, technical mastery, women do really well. But I think in terms of owning your own self and knowing who you are as a leader, and having the language of leadership. And the last thing I'll say is that, because of the statistic you just gave, Dr. Ross, senior leadership and CEOs it's still a man's world, unfortunately. So there is still value in learning the language of leadership in that regard, even though there are women's ways of leading. Women's ways of leading has not yet occupied all of those seats that we needed to occupy. And so we still have to navigate that role between the genders. I really think I was a college athlete, so I know that language of male leadership. If you listen to the boardroom, Pat Hine did this decades ago. She talked about the language of leadership, and unfortunately, there's still a lot of sports analogies. And so you still have to break it down, know the language of leadership, know how to navigate that, and then add incredible value so that you become invaluable.
I like your statistic, Dr. Ross, because I always encourage people to break down the statistics as well, and really look at it from an intersectional lens. So of the CEOs in those Fortune 500 companies, 5 of them total are Black. 2 of the 5 are Black women. And then if you drill down further into those data points, it tells a really scary story about the necessity of the revitalization of a systems architecture that's inclusive of us, number one, understanding and having this very deep connectedness to exactly what Dr. Paccione said, which is the language. But then two, I think that it's kind of my job at the Women's Chamber to take companies along this spectrum of resystematizing what they do and how they create their businesses. Because there's not 2 Black women CEOs in these Fortune 500 companies. It's not a competency question, right? This is a question about who do you think has the audacity and access to perform in these big, bold leadership roles? And why do you think that way? And so the work Global Minded does is just so incredibly critical, but then it's up to all of us as well to really continue to push those definitions, to drive for representation, to legislate representation where necessary, i.e. creating board criteria to ensure, because that's where the leadership actually is really happening. Because those statistics is just really there. It lets us know that we're dealing in something that is industrialized and archaic, and we've evolved past it. Now we have to push through it.
Thank you.
I want to
Other
piggyback on what Angie and of course Simone emphasized. And again, going back to Angie's point earlier, men, as we know, still holds a majority of the share of the pie. I mean, they still write the biggest checks as of 2020, for example, right? 62% at least, or 68% of the total global wealth is still held by men. So I think an additional effort needs to be put into really engaging men into the entire conversations. I was so deep into this, passion of ours that in 2013, we actually launched Conversations with Men. It's a very specialized and focused panel. We launched with the New York Times, and what it is just really highlighting, conversations like really direct to the point, honest conversations with male leaders in different sectors, in a top level position, and getting their views and engaging with them head on, why they need to really be on board, elevating women in the leadership positions in the companies that they manage, and even in the government sector, et cetera, and really focus on the economic values that brings. It's just black and white. It's not about tokenization, or because we're female and we're underrepresented and we need that. No, it's just purely the economics. And I think based on the conversations that we've had, and this is also part of the annual Power of Collaboration Global Summit we do at the United Nations every year. We're going to be on our 9th year now in September this year. We have progressed a lot in terms of really just making male leaders understand, from an economic standpoint, and how this will benefit them, how sponsoring and working with women, elevating women in the workplace, giving them a seat in the board, on a table with them, etc., will really benefit them. And if you take that as well on a more granular level, for example, families, it's the same thing. How family can benefit as well when there's an equal opportunity in all aspects given to both the husband and wife or whatever. But so I think that's one of the missing piece or a link that if not addressed and if not given more focus, and that is engaging men. I think we're going to be in the same discussion 10 years from now, and we'll just have probably just have achieved 1% or something of what we're trying to talk about here.
When we talk about statistics, 94% of women in the C-suite are former college athletes. That says something. Not Ernst & Young just did that study, and it was reported in 2018. They did the study, reported in 2022. 94% of women in C-suite positions are former college athletes. I think there's a reason for that. I think there's a sense of leadership presence that we talk about. I think there's a sense of the language. I think there's there's a little bit of, hit you in the shoulder and say, good job. I mean, there's still that culture that exists. And until that culture changes, that is a way that has been successful for many women.
Well, and I'd like to add to that statistically. It was interesting when I immediately had left Women of Wall Street. I was the CEO of a wonderful nonprofit here in Denver called the Women's Vision Foundation, AKA the Leadership Investment. And so I did a lot of research, and Ernst & Young did do a study, has done studies for probably 20 years now, so for quite some time. And unfortunately, we're still having this identical conversation 20 years later. And that is economically, Janet, to your point, if you have a diversified C-suite and a diversified leadership group and a completely diversified staff, the profitability of the companies, I don't care if they're public or private, increase on average by 39%. The irony in that is, as a former Wall Street executive, we are legally obligated, every single publicly traded company is legally obligated, number one, to make money for their shareholders. Now, a public benefit corporation is just the opposite of that. You have to put people first. And ironically enough, the profits will, in theory, based on recent facts, increase by 39%. Those numbers, you cannot argue with those statistics. So it's not proven, it's proven economically. And then interestingly enough, one project I was on when I was Senior Vice President of Citi Smith Barney before Morgan Stanley bought us, I was on the Executive Advisory Council to the CEO of Smith Barney. And so he chose 8 women in the industry that were leaders at our company to kind of ascertain what can we do as an organization to really promote women. And so what we implemented was 2 things. We did blind hiring, which Citigroup still does today. So that's one of my few proud moments, is I was integral in making that happen. And then secondly, the thing we did was give grades for internal promotions, because let's face it, most promotions are internal. And then the third thing we did was start an advocacy program, because all these companies have these wonderful mentorships. A mentor takes on a mentee, and it's usually a woman taking on a junior woman. That doesn't get you anywhere. It really doesn't. You learn something from it. No doubt it's a wonderful program. I'm a firm believer, but advocates are the good old boys hitting each other in the shoulder, to your point, Angie. And hey, guess what position's open? I think you ought to apply. Those conversations do not happen between a man and a woman. They just don't. So once people realized that we needed to be treated equally, because we do have different values and we bring different, talents to the table, if you will, and not try to change one another, but to learn how to work together more effectively, I think is the key. But, Citigroup, they take the name off the resumes now, which is brilliant. You don't know if it's a man, you don't know if it's a woman, you don't know anything about them.
I wanted to also second what everyone was saying here too, around just the structural inequities that we have to stare at every day. And maybe there's a language or a confidence or tools that may work short term for a period of time, but at the end we butt up against unequitable systems and structures that were never built for our success. And all the stats just keep going back there. Running a public benefit corporation who is reliant on some investment funding, you get sort of this, I would call it almost like this constant request to shape shift and translate across all of the requirements, from the finance investors speak, the customers speak, the end users speak. But at the end of the day, they still want to hear you sound like a leader. What does a leader look like, right? They go back to the same Fortune 500 leaders who traditionally, if you really looked, I appreciated what Simone was saying, go into the to the details, when you look at the background, the fact that most came with capital, the most came with the education level, most came with connections, regardless, and speak the language of the dominant culture in which they're operating. That is the global economy. So what happens for everyone else, the majority? It's very difficult to break in. And is it what we need to do is break in, or actually show that different types of businesses can be made and thrive? And that's really what we want to do. We are going to make different businesses that have representative teams, that make representative products, that are actually in service to humanity and succeed at scale. So just eyes on the prize, if you will. If we can do more of that through sponsorship, telling the truth, figuring out networks of support, and actually acknowledging the truth behind the systems that have not been perpetuating success for all, and just keep trying our best. I mean, true story though, I have zero skills in sports and could not speak a lick of it. They could smell it every situation. They'd say baseball, I'm thinking basketball. So I was already doomed to fail. It was just day one.
But you're one of the 6% that made it without sports. So good on you. Good on you.
Yeah.
I love that, because I think it's also about a mind shift, right? Just as inequity has been systematized, and that's been with intentionality. It wasn't this blind systematization of inequity. It was very direct. It started back with indentured servant contracts, right? We're talking 1700s. That is a systemization of a framework for work that we still follow in 2022. And we're talking like Enlightenment era systems of inequity that still follow us to this day. So just as that happened, it's mission critical that we systematize equity within our structures. And so I've had so many, God bless white dudes. I love them. Nobody leave this call saying Simone Ross doesn't love white dudes. They're great. But I've had so many angry white dudes like yell at me, like red in the face. And they say, it starts with culture, Simone. And I say, I love that you're so confident, but you're incorrect. It actually is a healthy mixture of leadership, operations, and then culture. Because if in fact you do create systems operationally that yield equity, your culture is automatically going to come with it. And then it's going to be this really cool magnet, right? Where people that follow those systems are drawn to it. And these systems range from compensation, they range from recruiting. We're talking about even in your code of ethics, on your board of directors, we have these non-competes and we have these conflict of interest, and that's the law. But we don't have any words in there that say, as I'm distributing these grant dollars, it is my job to be aware of my implicit bias. That's my job as somebody that is granting money. There's nothing in there that says it's wrong. There's, what Karen said with creating blind resumes. That is a system that you created to yield equity. And so you took something and you said, well, I've kicked the tires, I've looked under the hood. And so this is where we can create accessibility. And we're going to continue. What did the stat say? Billions of dollars spent on DEI. Oh my gosh, those trainings. Training is 11% of it. It's about systemization.
So, speaking of systemization of equity, in my role at the Colorado Community College System, I'm over student affairs. And so I get to work with student affairs departments across the state, 13 colleges, 115 or so thousand students. But when I have conversations around equity with students of color and women students in particular, the things that I hear are things like a concern about equity, because whether, in all aspects of their life right now, they're hearing things like, you did that so well as a poor girl, or, do you really want to go after that promotion? What about your kids? You got this opportunity because of your gender. You aren't aggressive enough. You need to be more forceful. Things like that, right? And so in your experience, when you've been confronted with those kinds of things, how did you deal with them? Like, what kind of advice would you give to women and students and folks who are having to experience those kinds of microaggressions every day? And
That's a tough one. I'll speak to that just because I kind of found the opposite almost, right? Which I know might sound a little odd.
Mm-hmm.
The aggression was more around don't be too opinionated, was the very subtle feedback that we received as women. There weren't too many of us that were in leadership, where there are less than 5% in just leadership roles altogether. I'm not talking C-suite, I'm talking leadership, period.
Mhm.
But I noticed that the women pretty much across the board that spoke their mind were kind of the first ones to get pushed out legally by the system. So it's interesting to hear you say that, because I've never had a single male come to me and say, Karen, you need to speak up. Karen, you need to be more aggressive. And we've studied that a lot at the leadership investment and found that in fact doesn't work to be more aggressive, because we don't need to start acting like men in the workplace. I think we need to be true to ourselves and be truly who we are and support one another as women. I will say at Smith Barney, it was the most incredibly supportive group of women I've ever worked with. I didn't experience that in my previous executive positions and leadership roles. So I think it's very important that women support women, but I think it's important that we bring our feminine leadership to the workplace. I feel pretty strongly about that.
You know, mom tracking is a thing. We talk about it a lot at the chamber. I remember fighting tooth and nail not to be mommy tracked. I had a pregnancy for 6 months and I worked at a healthcare company. I looked ridiculous. I hid it until my top button was bursting off of my blazer because I was fighting against being mommy tracked. And it happens. And, you know, really what we're doing now at CWCC is we're supporting women and businesses and feeling comfortable creating human experiences. And so when we're working with employers, again, about systemization, it's, do you have a mom that needs time to lactate? Put it on your Outlook. That seems really small, right? But back in 2014 and 2009, when I had my babies, it was like my great shame to have to lactate. I would be like, oh God, I gotta go do this thing. It's so disruptive to the day. I'd be pumping in my car because I didn't want to normalize it. And just think about that culture, right? Where you just feel that. And so we do a lot of work with employers to say, okay, we want to fight mommy tracking by radically and audaciously humanizing the human experience that it is when these things happen. And so, talk to me this time next year. We've got a couple of pilot organizations where we've just got a whole list. That might be the good thing with COVID, right? Because you would see my crazy wild kids and the dog popping in the screen and people realize like, oh, shoot, your kids love you. That's weird. But we're kind of taking that now to the next level though, to say, let's normalize that. Let's find flex time. Let's use technology to be able to normalize the human experience, to create safety and to really put people in a place of power to have these human experiences.
And so, and as it relates to the microaggression piece, right? When you have been confronted with any of those things, right? How did you deal with them? You know, and what advice would you share with folks who may face some of those things?
I would say attempts to undermine your leadership and publicly or in a large setting happen a lot. For me as a woman leader in tech, the space that I'm in, to almost second guess both the experience that they bring, the product we brought to market, and to continually ask and ask and ask if it's real. Where I don't think you necessarily get that from other folks who just put their stamp on it and it's assumed. So what I do with those microaggressions is, for better or worse, I think it was probably my first attempt at becoming a leader in youth, was thinking that knowledge is power. If I know more than everyone in the room, that will protect me. I can have the information that they don't have, and somehow that will give me a position there, that I can speak with facts. I can bring that all. Come to learn that actually it's not necessarily facts that people care about. It isn't necessary that once people are made aware of the injustices or the cruelty, they'll do something about it. So then it became the second thing. You do need to speak up for yourself and communicate the truth that you bring to the table, and call out aggression when it's in front of you, or directly next to you or across the room, and to be proactive every time it happens. I think otherwise it becomes that one thing swept under the carpet, that insult, that injury, that really taking somebody to task disrespectfully in front of a group. I do believe that becomes part of leadership, absolutely calling it out when you see it, in a respectful way, in a humane way, not to repeat the damage, but ultimately not to then make it invisible so that it isn't in fact something that will continue in a space.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I'll say with Karen, I didn't experience that either. I'm speaking now for the 94% who had an athletic background. In fact, just the opposite is almost a halo effect for women who can speak that language, who has that ability to kind of interact across the gender that way, then it became like, well, Angie's done X, Y, and Z. And it was like, in my mind, I'm thinking, actually, no, I haven't. But I was ascribed things that I hadn't been in terms of that halo effect because of the relationship that was built on the relationship of sports. And so there's a reason why 94% of the women in C-suite have athletic backgrounds, because of the ability, I think, to navigate that. I don't want to take away from women's ways of leading, but there's a way to infiltrate, so to speak, so that you can bring women's ways of leading into the conversation. And so being able to recognize that, in fact, I had to call out that halo effect in places where I've worked for that reason. It's like, wait, I didn't read that, and so we got to be cognizant of that as well.
No, I never won. I experienced victory over microaggressions. It's true. It's real. I think if I had to categorize what victory over microaggressions would actually be understanding the root of the narrative and getting very clear on what my personal narrative is. Because I heard them all. I probably still hear them, but I just got this vibranium deflector thing happening these days. But I've heard that you don't smile enough, you're not collaborative. Will you hand out the agendas? Do you work here? Whose building is this? I've heard the microaggressions, the microassaults, the being questioned about a gap analysis versus an accrual-based report versus a cash-based report, and telling me, and so I never won that, and I don't know that I will. I think for me, I'm not going to lie, corporate was really tough on me as a formerly young Black woman, being the only one in the C-suite. It broke me down psychologically. It broke me down mentally. I went to therapy. I had to, because it was traumatic. And I think it's critical that we do have these stories with the business community, because it is that humanization, right? Of that one time you told me that I didn't smile enough, and I'm now walking around the office like this. Like, that's weird. My face hurts. It's weird, right? But also it created something psychologically and emotionally to where I actually became really fearful. And so we got to talk about that. And so there are therapists out there that will help women that have my story really get very clear on what their truth is and what their narrative is at the point that you do experience these pieces of trauma. Once I did finish my therapy, and I got people, y'all, I got an EMDR therapist, I've got whatever you need, I got it. I think once you do that work, though, when it does become violent, and I hope it doesn't, that's why we're all here doing this work. Again, it comes to operationalizing equity. And it comes down to creating some shared language and shared definitions, because it's surprising. There's people that don't know what a microaggression is. They don't know that when you tell them you have an MBA, or you, Dr. Ross, I remember back in the day, somebody said, what kind of doctor are you? Are you like a PhD? Or are you like the Black people kind of doctor where they just give the title? That's a micro invalidation, right? And
Yeah.
people say it tongue in cheek, but that is a violent micro invalidation. And when those things compound based on what you get from the world, what you're getting internally at work, what you're getting at home, what you're seeing on the news, that is when things become catastrophic. And so if you create a shared language that says we as a company, as a department, have adopted these definitions and we use them, and we're not doing call in, call out culture, we're doing call in culture, to call into the conversation. And then at the point that we do need to escalate a concern, we're not escalating it at the human resource level, because that means that it's a performance management issue. You can't performance manage my Blackness out of me. Trust me, they've tried. I get blacker by the day. So you can't performance manage my culture and my love and my people and my passion out of me. However, we can escalate it and create a coaching opportunity to ensure that we're all clear on the shared language that we adopted, that we're clear on the anti-oppression policy that we've adopted, and how this particular interaction that caused me to escalate it, how this does have an impact for me as a human being. And I think that that's what it takes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's funny. You reminded me of a funny story. It's happened multiple times, and I introduced I'm Dr. Ross. Oh, what club do you spin at? What do you mean, what club do I spin at? I must be Dr. Dre? Like, you gotta be kidding me. So,
Oh my God.
but hey, being who I am, I say, oh, you know what? I got 2 free passes for you at the club, and I give them a fake address. I don't know how that turns out, but hey, it is what it is. But speaking about like the narrative and understanding people's stories and where people are coming from, I think it's obvious, but we're having Women's History Month, and we're celebrating these stories, and we're talking about, and we're shining a light on really amazing people. Why is sharing the narrative, or why is sharing these types of stories so important, and what can we learn from them? And let's start with Janet on this one.
There's really a lot, that we'll learn from our stories and through the years, as we celebrate and observe Women's History Month. I think I want to actually go back to the previous conversation, just to add on that, and the learning for this as well is that for those listeners, especially our young women who are with us right now, who are challenged by all this, who encounter these obstacles and aggressions, in its whatever space they are, and to learn from this, I think, is just to really, I know this is better said than done, but really eyes on the prize, like what Jessica mentioned earlier. I know, don't, I know you tell me, come on, Janet, you say that because you probably have not experienced it, which I humbly, admit I have not experienced those, like Karen and Jessica, as well, but I've heard hundreds, if not thousands. I deal with a lot of young people all the time through all these years, and those complaints, etc. The shared stories and narratives always come. And what I always tell them, I know it's hard, but just focus on the prize, right? And and if you can, this is where it's important to surround yourself with a very good support group. This is where your tribe is gonna come in to support you, specifically the mental and psychological aspect of it, just like what Simone said, that's right now, actually, I'm dealing with a few millennials right now who are really high achievers in their own fields, etc., but they struggle daily with mental, psychological issues behind microaggressions, behind not being seen in the company, for example, behind being neglected, no matter how brilliant they are, no matter what amazing ideas they have to contribute to the table. And I tell them, well, and they tell me I'm exploding, I hate it, they're so angry and stuff. And I tell them, this is where you should really build a very healthy support system. It doesn't have to be just women. You gotta have men as well who understand, who empathize, and who will support you And even, most importantly too, who can stand for you? I mean, who can help you call out these microaggressions? That is the ultimate, when men call out their own, to speak to the truth that this is wrong, what you're doing to such and such is wrong. That to me should be the ultimate like advocacy for every man, to stand for, for women in front of their fellow men. So through all these celebrations and observations, to your point, Dr. Ross, about Women's History Month, we do it at the United Nations with the Commission and Status of Women every year. Thousands of women descend here in New York, at the United Nations, of course, prior to COVID, but it's like conversations, same over and over again, and if we do not really address the systemic side of it, like what all my fellow speakers have said, the change will really be almost, non-existent. So.
Other thoughts there?
I would say I think statistics motivate me a great deal because the math just doesn't add up. If women are over 50% of the world's population, but less than 0.5% of recorded history, this is just not making any sense. If we know there are 197 countries on the planet and only 12 countries have equal representation for women under the law, this just doesn't make sense. And so when we look at the structural inequities and we see them in every community, in our own lives, what do we do to call it out personally? I understand that we need to call it out in a month, etc., but it's a daily practice. Like, this is just not working out. The math is not working out. And ultimately, the systems will not provide sustainable livelihoods for all. And I happen to be an idealist and believe that people at root want humanity to succeed. So potentially that makes me one of the few. But at the end of the day, if we want people to succeed and thrive, we have to call out these where the inequities are clearly just daunting.
And I think if we call them out, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go, Karen.
If we call them out, I think it's really important to follow up on those, because it's one thing to make a point, but we have to take action with it. Because one of the things we did when I was on that board for Smith Barney is we brought in very high professional trainers from New York City to train all of our senior most executives at the firm. And then the 8 of us women were then tasked with asking them, what did they learn? How did they feel about this diversity and inclusion training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So 8 women interviewed approximately 40 men that were our senior leaders, so that we reported to them. Every single one of them, 100%, said the training was fabulous, but I didn't need it. 100%. Now, keep in mind, none of us interviewed any of them together. So it wasn't like they got together and said, let's make sure they understand that we really didn't need that. That was just their natural response. So the awareness is important, calling it out is important, but then following up with some action steps that we can do as leaders to really support one another is critical, because we're still having this conversation that I personally became professionally involved with D&I 20 years ago. And I was on every diversity and inclusion board at every Wall Street firm. And we got together and talked the talk, but I have not seen much walking of the walk still to this day. And that's where all of us as leaders can really make a difference, is making sure these conversations continue, making sure we come up with an action plan to make a difference for all diversity candidates. It's not just about women. It is not. It's about all of us. Everyone sitting here, we're all diverse candidates. We're all diverse people. And we also bring better products and services to the market if we have a diverse company and a diverse group of leaders.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and thanks for those comments. The populations that have been marginalized get a month, Black History Month, Women's History Month, where the other population gets a whole year. And so we have to change that. And part of changing the narrative is to bring a spotlight to it, so that we can have a campaign, if you will, of information and a campaign of awareness. And so that we can, bring the light and shine the light a little bit closer, so that we can see the equality that exists that really is what propels the need for equitable practices. And so we do have to put thoughts and celebrations into action.
So real quick, it's funny. I've got a student watching. I just got a text message, and she wants to ask about confidence and rule breaking. And let me read this. Why? I'm just going to read it as is. Okay. So why do dumb boys apply for jobs and get them and smart girls not?
Sadly, we know the answer to that question.
You know,
So it's interesting. I used to manage this think tank co-working space, and so guys would come in and they'd say, I'm a CEO and I'm running $1 million company, Simone, and this is how you can help me. So I'd say, well, let me see your financials. What are your annual earnings? They'd say, oh, I earn about $5,000 a year. And I'm like, oh, wow, Josh, that's really good. A woman would come to me and she'd say, I'm trying out this business concept. I don't know if it's going to work. I've been dabbling at it, but I'm just not quite there. Okay, all right, Pam, what are your annual earnings? God, 1.2 million. But there's just more that I want to do. And so it's interesting, right? Because men, they walk in this audacity that is enviable. And I try it on maybe 3 times a week. Sometimes it works well, other times it's super uncomfortable. But they walk in this bold audacity of certainty. And certainly that's informed by power, privilege, personal self-view, but they walk in it and it works. Women, number one, we question everything, even ourselves. Number 2, when we're applying for that job, we say we have to have every single thing checked off. And that's not true, because Josh don't be having them little boxes checked, honey. Number 3, we don't get great feedback. It's called benevolent sexism. And so we know that women statistically will get feedback that is rooted in personality. We know that BIPOC women, it's even worse because it's rooted in personality and implicit bias, whereas men actually get concrete feedback. And so all of these narratives play in our minds, and it impacts sometimes how the outcome is when we apply for these amazing roles. And so that's where what Karen said and what everybody said comes in. We have a responsibility to you, amazing student that is battling the stupid dumb boy that's getting the role. To create sponsorship relationships, and hopefully your mentorship relationships will turn into sponsorship relationships where we are speaking your name at tables that you might not have a chair at just yet, and that we are ensuring that we are elevating women when we are leaving a role, that we fill the role with another woman, and that we're doing those things systemically. And then, man, try on Josh's energy every once and again. I swear, just try on, be kind, don't lose that. Try energy on. It's Dr. Paccione said, just try it on, even if it feels a little bit awkward. I'm telling you, y'all, I had a Josh attack last Friday, and I just became Josh. I became Steve. Let me tell you, that was very successful. And sometimes, Josh, try on that. Let me speak to your manager energy. Try it on, because it's your right. And that's the difference, right? That's your right.
And Josh doesn't have the imposter syndrome, right? So Josh doesn't think that he's not capable of doing whatever it is that job requires. And that isn't a bit of, I don't know if it's just arrogance or blind confidence, but like somebody said in the chat, women feel like they have to check every box. And more importantly, as a woman of color myself, there's a feeling that you have to not only check every box, but check all the boxes that aren't on that list that you can then say that you have. So you have to be overqualified. And so if we are constrained by those things, then we don't walk into that interview feeling like this is a job that I can do, that I'm qualified for, that I should have. And so there's a feeling of a lack of confidence. And so, yeah, the imposter syndrome, I think, is alive and well, unfortunately.
And heaven forbid that interview panel looks nothing like you too, right? There's a lot happening psychologically with internalized oppression, imposter syndrome. And so again, it's one of those things where it's like, just just channel Josh's energy. It'll get more natural. Let's just combine it with that. I want to talk to your manager energy. I promise you, it's going to be weird and you're going to be like, oh.
I love that. I'm
gotta do it.
going to add to it because I'm going to speak from, I have a twin brother, Jeff. He's the one that has the imposter syndrome. He's the one that feels inadequate in the room. And so as the sister, I have to channel more Jessica. Jessica, who goes to the front, asks questions, asks for help, doesn't necessarily feel like I'm an imposter. I'm here to learn and to get what I need for my family who's in a bus and my brother to feel like he can navigate the next steps. I think there are a lot of us out there that just aren't in the boardroom or at the front who speak our truth. Now, will I hit a lot of Josh's who actually, when I do a pitch, when I do talk about reaching billions, when I do talk about here's the business model and everything else, they're still going to want to take me out. So that's the fact that even with all of the mimicking and not, even if you bring all the credentials, if you have all the models, if you've got it all, that's not what we're talking about here. You will take a spot. And at the end of the day, they tend to want to give the spot to somebody familiar that speaks and acts and does what they like. And that's the facts. And when you've got the majority, 99 or 98% in that position, you are in a different opportunity zone. So again, back to what everybody's saying, collaborate, sponsor, tell the truth, do your part. And by all means, be kind to yourself and others because this is daily and it will take a long time. And that resilience is, I think, what's needed if you want to call it out and work in this space in leadership.
The worst part about this panel every month is that we get to 2:57 and I'm like, I want to do this for 3 more hours. This is so good. This is feeding my soul. I know it's feeding the people who are tuned in and it's just so amazing. But we just have a few minutes left. And so I'd like to give you just a quick opportunity. I'll just call you off one by one. And just if there's something that a jewel that you want to share or something that you want people to know about women in leadership, let's leave them with the final thought. And we'll start with Karen.
I would say one thing: stay strong, know your values, know your worth, be confident, and don't worry about checking off all the boxes on the application, because to Simone's point, it is 100% true. Men are happy if they're 30%. Women think we need to be at 100%. You do not. Be confident, know your worth, and speak your truth and be yourself.
Dr. Paccione.
Well, yeah, I think, women are stronger, wiser, and smarter than most people know, but we also need to know that we are. And so live in it, walk in it, rest in it, and then add value everywhere. Whether the value comes back to you or not, you are making a contribution. So I love what Karen said, know who you are, walk in that. And I think, and what I tell everyone, pursue your passion, walk in the direction of your talents, your strengths, the things that fulfill you, and you'll end up exactly where you're supposed to be. And I think my life and the circuitous route I've taken to this position, I think that speaks for itself. And so pursue your passion, your purpose, your talent, your skill set. You'll end up exactly where you're supposed to be.
Jessica.
I would just say, please build teams, products, and systems that promote equity at its core. And embrace that as a daily and a lifelong practice.
Absolutely. Janet.
As a woman who have embraced, my personal mission in life to influence my fellow leaders and alphas to channel power, influence, and money to purpose, I want to speak to you, if you are a female leader, that you have a responsibility to uplift and sponsor and support those women who need all this support from you. You need to open doors. You need to open opportunities. You didn't get to where you are without the same challenges and obstacles that these younger women are going through right now. So you have to think of that. Because why? Because it's really has been systemic, and it will continue to be systemic because the system really wasn't built for women. So if you are a female leader, this is what I want to say to you. Do everything you can to lift up those that are coming from behind and wanted to be at that place as well. Thank you.
Simone.
I said everything I was going to say. Just say the one thing that makes you different is the one thing that's going to catapult you. I think a lot of times women in leadership actually don't really recognize the power that feminine energy has. Men have feminine energy, yes, but women are remarkable because our feminine energy is like, oh, it is us. And so it's a critical thing that we need in business. It brings wholeness, it brings compassion, it brings relationship building, collaboration. And so don't try on somebody else unless you try it on Josh for those moments you need that Josh energy. But don't try to become someone else, and really tap into the power of your feminine energy. Because I think that the next generation of leaders and business 2.0 is going to be demanding feminine energy.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. So appreciative. The YouTube link will be up very soon. Go to Global Minded to get that. And for all of you, I want to invite you to come join me June 22nd through the 24th for the Global Minded Conference. I'm going to be there, so you should be there. Also going to be doing a panel, maybe two if I get lucky. There's some really cool topics that are curating in the back of my mind, and would love to have you guys come be a part of those things in person, and so we can get a different level of crowd participation. But please put your virtual claps together, wherever you are, for our panelists. Thank you guys so much for being here. Just happy Women's Leadership and History Month to everyone. And with that being said, I want to turn it over to Carol before we get out of here today. Carol.
Well, thank you. And Ryan, as you said, we hope to see everyone in person. And actually, I'm talking to Simone tomorrow morning, and we're hoping to do a 2-hour deeper dive on this topic so we can involve a lot more people and be live. And for those of you who have said, are you doing hybrid? The answer is no, we're not doing hybrid. We're just going to be with the live humans, June 22, 23, 24. Because we do 7 of these virtual sessions every month. So that's our virtual. And we will have the link tomorrow in the newsletter to this session, so you can share it out with your institutions, your universities, your K-12, your organizations, wherever you work. And we hope you'll share this broadly, because we really do believe these kinds of real truth-telling sessions can really inform and advance allies, and also for other women to get strength and courage to go beyond any roadblock that they might face to achieve their greatness. So for those of you who haven't been, Global Minded is a 65% diverse conference. It's incredible people. There'll be several hundred students there, as well as people like those on this panel. And it's a really incredible group of generous leaders. And I think it'll make you very hopeful about the future. So thank you, Ryan, for such an incredible panel. And thanks to each of you for joining us. And please share this liberally with your friends and your network. We'll see you next month. Take care.
Everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
That was good.
Ryan, that was awesome.
Mhm.
I mean, really, all those people were so different.
Mhm.
And then